Thanks all for coming. My name's Peter Murray. I work for a company called DigitasLBi out of their London office. I'm going to tell a bit of a story about our journey to adopting APM on a particular client engagement. And hopefully some of the bits that we touch on will be familiar to those of you who are going through the same sort of process. So, a few takeaways from the session. The first one, I promise, will make more sense in a few minutes, but we've got a set of enablement chips that we've kind of come up with as an approach to driving adoption. Second one is keep it accurate and keep it interesting. That's really important to develop adoption and retain adoption. And lastly, it takes a while. We've been live for about a year. We're still working on it. It's not a finished thing. So, quick run through of the topics that we'll cover. I'll give you a bit of background about who DLBI is, who the client is that we're working with. I'm going to touch on the challenges that we found for APM and the procurement process, a bit about the platform that we're running. I'm then going to talk a bit about what we've done to encourage adoption within our teams and talk a bit about where we're heading next. So, a bit of background. DigitasLBi, we're basically a really big web design company. The marketing people would shoot me for saying that, but we're a global full-service digital agency, if we're going to use their terminology. 25 offices, about 6,000 employees. We were formed about 3 years ago from a merger between Digitas, who are mostly US-based, and LBI, which were mostly EMEA. As I say, I'm based out of the London office, the biggest office in the group. We're part of the Publicis Group, which is a much larger media organization, one of the big four. That's really useful for us. We have quite a few sister companies that we work with. So, the main focus of APM in this context is on one particular project called Helios. And the project is for the Renault and Nissan alliance, and that encompasses their sub-brands Infiniti, Datsun, and Dacia. And the aim of the project is it's pretty ambitious. It's to build a web platform to host all of their marketing sites globally. So that's 160 markets, about 100 languages, 360 individual sites. When you multiply that out by all of their sub-brands, pretty busy, 4.5 billion page views estimated per year. And the interesting point is at the end, it's 24/7 from a customer point of view, but it's also 24/7 for back-end operations. So the content authoring piece is continuous. They're based all around the world. All of their authors are pretty distributed. So from an availability point of view, it's pretty challenging. So the platform is based on AWS, which is great. It's the biggest AWS integration we've done. At the moment, it fluctuates between about 400 and 500 machines running at any given point. 3 regions, Ireland, US East, and Tokyo. It was quite an interesting sell, trying to get the alliance to pick up AWS. They had a lot of concerns about security, which we ended up jointly pitching with Amazon to allay. But the infrastructure, we started working with it kind of Q2 2014. So we've had a fair experience of using some of the tooling that Amazon give us. In terms of applications, it's a big Java platform, fully Java. The core of the platform is AEM, Adobe AEM, which, show of hands who use AEM, have used AEM? Anybody? Matt over there in the corner. It's basically a big CMS. It used to be called CQ5, run by a company called Day, and Adobe acquired them a few years back. I don't think Adobe would mind me saying it's quite a challenging platform to work with at times, but it's kind of cool at the same time. We use Apigee quite extensively for API aggregation. The scale of the project is quite crazy. We have about 1,000 back-end systems that we have to integrate with at Renault and Nissan. Using Apigee, we use their SaaS platform to help us achieve that. Data storage is all MongoDB, which is cool. really stable, really quite lightweight for the stuff we're doing with it. In terms of tooling, AppDynamics, obviously. We use Splunk extensively. We've used Splunk in DLBI for many years. It was brought into this project primarily as a compliance tool. We use the enterprise security app in there as well, but we use it for APM integrated metrics and machine data analysis and so on. We use Datadog for system metrics monitoring, although that may or may not change after this morning's announcements. For those of you who've played with the Datadog, it's a really cool tool. It's really good for aggregating lots of different data inputs. And we use Chef for configuration management and releases and that kind of stuff. Now, challenges. We came up with a bunch of challenges before we even selected the APM vendor we were going to go with. And the first one is velocity. It's an agile project. It has a 3-week release cycle. For production, it's 3-week sprints. For Dev and CI, we do about 50 builds a day, something like that, 50 releases a day. QA, about 10. UAT, about 5. Lots of velocity kind of challenges around that, and it's a really big project, so there's lots of issues that we've overcome around running Agile in a really big team, but that's probably a different topic altogether. Next to talk about is quality, and that kind of follows on from the velocity side of things. We really needed APM to help us maintain and continue delivering quality software. It's quite easy for velocity to start impacting quality, and we needed a way of measuring those key factors, whether they're stability or performance or otherwise. And scale. The APM, I think we saw APM as being the only way that we could really deliver this project with any chance of succeeding. We've got a team of about 300 guys and girls globally, 9 different countries. Our main bases are Bogota in Colombia and the London office that I'm based in, but we have teams in Poland, Romania, Vietnam, some in Mauritius, which I've got no idea why I've got a team in Mauritius, but I want to go there. So really big projects. APM, I think, was seen as I say, the only way that we could reliably achieve something of this scale. And why AppD? So we'd realized we needed APM. We'd come up with the challenges we needed to face with it. We then went into an RFP process. Both us and the client were involved in that. It was obviously going to be quite a big spend. So we got them involved, and quite predictably, it turned into a shootout between New Relic and AppD. AppD won, obviously, Matt. The reasons for that were really, it was seen as far more of an enterprise product, and that really appealed to our client. The granularity offered out the box, and actually the immediate return that we got out the box from it really appealed to our dev teams. And the roadmap was pretty compelling as well. So we realized we needed APM, we picked the tool. We then needed to think about how we were going to use it. And obviously it was a huge spend on a project even of this size. Our goal was really to make APM a business as usual process. We wanted every team in every work stream, in every office to start using it as part of their, whether it be a developer workflow or a QA workflow, certainly an ops workflow. DevOps. This is the first real big DevOps attempt that we'd done in DLBI. It's a pretty radical change from the way we'd traditionally worked. We've got quite a big managed services contingent within DLBI, all based out of, I think, London and Boston, but primarily London. It was quite a big ask for them to start adopting quite a different way of working, but also for the developers. And we saw that APM and DevOps really is a marriage made in heaven. It's the ideal partnership between trying to roll out something like DevOps as a working practice and gathering the amount of data that we need to really support that as an effective measure. So next point was measurement. We needed to measure how well we were doing on this project. It had huge visibility within the LBI. It's also got huge visibility within the client. It's quite a big leap of faith for them to try and standardize a global platform like this. So success, failure, how well it's performing, whether that's internal metrics for our developers, our ops guys, but also business-focused metrics for client feedback within their own organization. And we needed everybody to start feeding the data that they collect out of APM into intelligent decisions, whether that's something as basic as we need bigger EC2 instances for AEM authors or whatever that may be, but also to maybe think, well, okay, we need to refactor that particular piece of functionality because it's not driving the right sort of performance on a business metric perspective. So we've done all of that. We then engaged with the enablement team at AppD, and we rolled out in about 5 days. Having Chef is really useful for that. So pushing the machine agents out and the JVM agents took literally 5 days across every environment, and we have 14 environments, I think. We then spent another 5 days doing an initial setup, and that was basically defining tiers and application structures. So at the end of that, we had a rudimentary working deployment of AppD. That was super cool, 10 days, pretty damn quick. So this is where it starts to get a bit more interesting. We did all of this. We publicized it quite a lot internally. The DevOps team were the first to really pick it up. They were involved with the rollout, so they were super keen to get their hands on it. They started building dashboards for days. It was genius. They loved it. The App Support guys, App Support in this project pick up post-release live issues. They were a little bit slower, but now they've incorporated into their proactive monitoring side of things and also their triage process when things really go wrong. So really good. Developers, on the other hand, were not so good. And we spent and still do spend a bit of time trying to figure out why they don't use it as much as we'd like, but that's kind of been our focus for driving adoption. One of the nice surprises was the alliance. The client themselves picked it up pretty quick. We run quite an open, transparent project. We have about 40 clients in the London office signing work off, working with us at the technical side of things as well. They picked it up really quick, which is a nice surprise. And Adobe themselves, Adobe have been pretty good. We gave logins to their senior R&D and senior support guys so they could see what was going on. I won't go into too much detail about how wobbly AEM can be, but it was nice that they could see when it was wobbly. Nice positive story out of that is they've fed back into their internal development and into the Apache project, which underlies AEM. It's an OSGI platform, so they've fed back into the project the need to expose more metrics for APM tools to use. So that's pretty positive. But developers, we spent a long time thinking about this, how we could try and figure out a way of getting them to use it more. And we ran a few questionnaires, and one of the bits of feedback, in fact, a few of them was, one of them was, it looks too complicated. The next one was, it's too much information in one place. It's difficult to figure out what was what. And lastly, it was difficult to know just where the hell to start with it. They look at the dashboard, it looks lovely, or they look at the map rather, it looks lovely, but then where did it go? So we thought about this, and we thought some of those were just a bit rubbish. But I think some of the pushback on it was there was still a bit of resistance to rolling out the DevOps process on this project. There was quite a lot of feeling that metrics management or metrics monitoring side of stuff was something that ops does, and it's not a developer task. And that was more of a cultural thing that we worked pretty hard to try and overcome. So, what have we done? Normally we don't call it chips, but since we're in Vegas, hey. We came up with these six kind of pillars of adoption process. And the first one was champions, and that fits pretty well with our DevOps approach. We followed various different routes into trying to push DevOps out as a process, but one of them was using champions, so training these guys up in process and tooling. and then setting them free within their own teams to try and evangelize the DevOps tooling. And the same thing applies to APM. So it works really well for us. We have a super distributed team, pretty big. Having the right people trained and kind of shouting about AppD has been really useful in pushing that forward. We don't tend to do a huge amount of structured training. What we do is have a few core people, mostly in the London office, who, when new features come out, really clue themselves up on it pretty well. And the online training documentation is really good for helping with that. But then we pass that information on, do knowledge transfer sessions with the champions in the organization, and that seems to work pretty well at keeping them abreast of new stuff. Next one is make things interesting. To try and counter some of the we don't know where to start arguments from the developers, we came up with a few really sort of best practice ideas, and one of them was really understand the audience, and this is kind of Adoption 101, but you really need to understand the audience, what the KPIs they might be interested in are, and then instrument them well and build some dashboards to show them. And here's an example. We had a common problem with the QA engineers, rather, who they'd be testing components in AEM and they wouldn't be working properly, and the common response was, oh, is XY API down or up? So rather than them have a raise a ticket or ping us on HipChat and kind of waste time there, we built them effectively, is it down for everybody or just me type dashboard that they can sit and look at, and it seems to work really well. We've actually made it public so that if a QA engineer doesn't necessarily have creds for AppD, they can jump in and look at this without having to log in. Similarly for developers, we had a historical issue with memory usage and some CPU stuff, certainly in the QA environment, so we built a really lightweight kind of quick view dashboard to see what was going on, and that was an example of that. For the ops guys, we exposed nice wallboards that, actually this is the wallboard that sits in our London office, or one of the two. And the key point here is that they're tailored towards the audience, and they're super clear, and it kind of avoids the it looks too difficult arguments. If there are requirements to delve a little bit deeper, it is really easy to start exposing more detailed stats, which that's an example of. Next one, and this kind of goes for any monitoring tool, but it's really, really important. We spend a lot of time working on trying to get the message out there to adopt APM, adopt AppDynamics, please use it, and so on. The worst thing in the world would be for people to start using it and then realizing that it's giving them obsolete or duff data. It's very quick for them to then turn around and say, oh, well, I don't believe it, effectively. So as a quick example, if we look at the QA dashboard, if it's green, when in fact it's actually like that, that's really not going to do you any favors. We were kind of guilty of this early on. I think we didn't keep track of where new features were being pushed out as part of the build process and kind of skewing stats, and we were starting to miss stuff. So really, you have to keep on top of maintaining your implementation. Next one is DevOps again. So for those of you who are on the DevOps journey or adopting DevOps, one of the methodologies is CALMS, and really measurement is where APM comes into its own. We use quite a few tools to get the full visibility of the platform, but AppD gives us by far the most information on this, so I'd strongly recommend you push that forward as part of a DevOps rollout if that's what you're working on. The other point is we use lots of different tools, and we found it really important to integrate with as many different endpoints as we can. One of the benefits from 4.1 is the HTTP alerting templating, which made this so much easier because it was quite tricky to start with, but I'm guessing a lot of you use Splunk. There's integrations out the box with Splunk. It's pretty easy to do. Datadog, we have bidirectional data flow between Datadog and AppD, so we squirt stuff into AppDynamics and we also expose it in Datadog. We have ticketing integration with Jira. We're a big Atlassian shop, so same goes for HipChat. Status page I/O is an interesting one. So we had a need to expose to people who weren't even working on the project but might be sat in an office in Turkey trying to update some content on the site, whether the platform was up, whether it was running badly or not. And that turned out to be quite an easy integration to do with some business rules within AppDynamics and then exposing those out to status page status. So, I mentioned HipChat. ChatOps is another buzzword. Apologies for that. It's kind of it's actually proved to be one of the most useful tools we've had for pushing out APM adoption. Really simple stuff. We have a big team. We use HipChat for all of our comms. We have many, many rooms talking about what we're doing, whether it's a specific release room or otherwise. We push out deep links into AppDynamics stats if that's an appropriate thing to share. We don't use screen grabs as much as we can, so basically it drives people to log into the tools and start exploring on their own, which we've kind of taken advantage of, and it works really well for our teams. A quick example of how we've done a really basic integration of HipChat and using the HTTP alerting templating within 4.1. And finally, you've done all of this. You've got hopefully, lots of people using your tooling. How do you then keep them interested and keep them using it? One of the things we saw quite early on was we see whenever we push updates out and make a big deal out of it, there's a spike of adoption, then it kind of tails off a little bit. So the first point is communications. When we have joiners and leavers, we send out comms to the new guys, regardless of where they are in the world, to say, look, here's a list of Confluence links that shows how to use AppDynamics, how to use Splunk, how to use all of our DevOps tooling. But it's really important that we keep that communication going. We're a marketing agency, so it'd be a shame if we couldn't market this internally. But whenever we make any changes, whenever we do dashboards that are interesting, whenever we get new features out, so 4.2, when it comes out in a few months' time, will make quite a good candidate for this. We communicate that to the whole project. And it just keeps people a bit more abreast of where things are heading and kind of how cool it actually is. Keep it fresh is kind of a key point. It can become a little bit stale, I think, and people get kind of bogged down in the old dashboards or otherwise. So it kind of goes back into the marketing. If you are making changes on dashboarding and kind of keeping it more interesting, keeping things up to date and tweaked, just let people know about it. And training, we ran a really interesting day with the Enablement guys where, it was a few months ago now, we had 2 days of 1-hour training sessions. So we managed to get through pretty much the entire dev team in the London office in those couple of days just to remind them of how cool a tool APM is. And that worked really well. And it was, I think the trainer was pretty much dead by the end of it, but it was kind of a really, really interesting couple of days, and it worked pretty well for our teams. And finally, measurement. It's super easy. Just turn on the controller user audit reporting. And even if you're using SaaS, we're a SaaS customer of AppDynamics, it just lets the key people know how many people are using it on a given day. I'm sure there's more intelligent ways of measuring that, but that's the way we do it. Next then, where are we going? Well, predictably, this little guy's making an appearance. And we're moving more towards a microservices-based architecture for our back-end stuff. We host about 15 to 20 APIs internally, and that's growing every day. It's a prime candidate for Dockerizing this stuff and using microservices, and that's going to be quite an interesting kind of period, I think, with how we deploy AppDynamics, and how we try and manage the developer workflow and keep them fully plugged in through working on small containers on the local machines and then seeing how they run in the production and non-production environments. So, hopefully that makes a bit more sense now. Enablement chips, keeping it accurate and keeping it interesting, and it does take a little while. Rome wasn't built in a day, I think is the key takeaways from this session. But I think we're probably running a little bit ahead of schedule. So if we've got time for a few questions, shout. No? What would we have done differently? I think we probably would have started focusing on capturing more requirements a little bit earlier, and we were a little bit late in the game with the deployment of this. We deployed AppDynamics just before the platform soft launched. What we should really have done was probably pick it up about 6 months earlier, but it's easy to say that in hindsight, but it would have probably allowed us to iron out some of the niggles for the first couple of months of usage a bit sooner.
Can you give some examples of how you marketed APM?
So yeah, we've got a few sessions that we run internally called lightning talks, and they're kind of little 5-minute sessions that we broadcast out to the whole of the tech team, not just on this project, but we've got about 700 people in the office in Brick Lane, and we have these little sessions where we have maybe 50 to 80 people in the room. So we've pushed it out as a cool new thing in those sort of sessions, but on a day-to-day basis, we use email quite a bit, to be fair. So we prep nice email comms that go out whenever we make changes, really basic stuff, but we have a very verbose Confluence project or setup for the whole project, and we've tried to focus some more targeted messaging into a separate area for the DevOps tooling, and we try and keep that up to date as best we can. Anybody at the back? Yeah. Sure. So if you couldn't hear, the question was how, kind of go into a bit more detail about the selection process between New Relic and AppD. Part of it was, to be fair, the pre-sales and sales engagements from AppDynamics were far, far superior to New Relic. I think certainly in the UK, the New Relic piece was quite weak a year or so ago when we were looking at this. I'm not sure if it's changed much in the meantime, but the whole process there went really, really smoothly and really impressed our clients and us. But at a technical level, I think the key takeaway that we got from that whole process with AppDynamics was just a little bit more automated at picking up metrics. There's a little bit less configuration that would be required dropping this in, and we really needed something that would get us up and running as quickly as we could. And really the level of digging that you had to do within New Relic at that time to get to the real nitty-gritty data was probably a bit of a turn-off for us. We really, from a technical point of view, really liked the ability just to see the metrics quite close to the surface, and then use them as quickly as we could. So they were kind of the key things. I'm, to be fair, using New Relic for quite a while now, so it's probably maybe a little bit out of date for those of you who do. But it's at that point, those are the three things. Yep.
Are you using the analytics features of AppDynamics now, and if so, are you looking to potentially replace your Splunk implementation with that?
So we don't at the moment, primarily because when we procured the licensing, it didn't exist. So we got the budget sign-off on what was available at that point. I think next Q1, Q2, we'll start to look at the analytics stuff again. Plus, I think there's enough in the 4.2 release for us to reevaluate a few other things, whether that's system monitoring or otherwise. Splunk will always be there. We use it, as I say, it was brought in initially as a compliance tool, and that isn't going to go away. The guys at Renault Security are quite hot on that, so that's always going to be there. But yeah, the log correlation stuff within APM, I think it's pretty compelling. Any more?
Question over here.
The lights are really bright, apologies. Go for it.
Did you get into any business transaction configuration, setting up alerts, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a continually evolving piece with us. The feature rollout speed on this project is quite high. So I think every few days almost we go and reevaluate at least something in that field. But the initial 10 days kind of got us up and running with a very broad strokes view of what BTs to start picking up. We'd bought end user monitoring as well, so we spent quite a while configuring that, and again, that is still evolving. we learned a few lessons pretty early on of how to configure BT, so we didn't end up with mountains of noise in our transactions list, but it's a continually evolving piece, really, as with APM in general, I think. Any more? Yeah, there's a chap over here.
Hi, are you still just using Splunk for compliance purposes, or is that extended to ITOA as well?
No, we use it for quite a broad range of things. The log data that we get out of AEM rather, is quite verbose. So we use it for picking out situations and awareness from those. And we dashboard in there as well. We trigger alerting via Datadog and via Pingdom and those kind of stuff. So it's still a very core piece of what we do. And the same goes for Datadog, to be fair. We do get a lot of the metrics, even now, in AppD that we get through Datadog, but it just exposes it in a slightly better way at the moment. Again, might change in 4.2, but right now we use a range of tools as opposed to just having a single pane of glass, which is how we've had to do it to date. Matt?
So, Peter, you were obviously operating as a very successful company before using AppDynamics. How do you go about selling the need for this product into management if you weren't using it prior and this big project came along?
That's a very good question. So we push it as Helios is kind of a bit of a beast, even within DLBI. It's kind of a life into its own. We try and do awareness sessions for all the technologies we use, whether it's AppDynamics or whether it's the chef work that we've spent 18 months building for this project. We brief our management on that, and hopefully they then spread the love and that side of things. But we have used APM. We've used AppDynamics on other projects in the past, specifically commerce-based stuff. So we had some experience through that. And certainly within managed services where I'm based, it's got a pretty high profile already. So, cool. Any more? Or are we good?
Well,
I think we're good.
that was a great
Thank you very much.